The views and opinions expressed in this podcast do not necessarily reflect those of the Society of Massage Archives. These interviews and commentaries represent the recollections of both the hosts and the guests, and as such, are subject to the occasional slight inaccuracies. The content here is for informational and educational purposes only. You should conduct your own historical research when determining the veracity of any of the statements made within. Greetings, and welcome to the Hands of History podcast, a production of the Society of Massage Archives, where we delve into the rich tapestry of massage therapy's past, explore its evolution, and share the stories that have shaped this vital practice. Today is Monday, February 3rd, 2025. I'm your host, Kirby Clark Ellis, and I'm joined today by Whitney Lowe. Whitney is a known authority in massage therapy with a 37-year career marked by clinical work, research, publication, and teaching in advanced massage principles. He specializes in treating pain and injuries using massage and is one of the pioneers of the orthopedic massage approach. Lowe's orthopedic massage program stands out in its engaging and accessible design and comprehensive curriculum. Students, whether learning online or in person, praise Lowe for his approachable style and personalized training. Welcome, Whitney.
Thank you so much, Kirby. Great to be here with you.
Yes, it's an honor to have you join us here on the Hands of History podcast, and can't wait to learn more about your experience in the profession.
Yeah, good. We were talking just a little bit before we got started. I just wanted to say also to everybody else who is a listener out there, if you haven't listened to the other episodes, that they are just a wealth of tremendous information from the people that you've interviewed so far. So kudos again to you for putting this wonderful series together.
Thank you so much, Whitney. And also, I find them to also be so inspiring, and I have no
Yeah,
doubt that what you will provide us today is going to be just as inspiring.
yeah. All right. Try to live up to that.
I'm sure you will.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into it, Whitney. Let's talk about your background. Can you tell me what initially drew you to massage therapy?
Yeah, so it was kind of accidental for me. I was in graduate school studying counseling psychology in the mid 1980s, and my former wife at that time had started massage school, and she was coming home every day and telling me about all the interesting and fascinating things they were learning in massage school, and a lot of it was kind of bordering on some really things that were relevant to what I was really interested in, a lot about the client therapist relationship and, the whole mind body connection and all this kind of stuff. And I was still into some very fundamental and rudimentary classes in my counseling program. And we were still, talking about rats running in mazes and things like this. And I was thinking, like, this is not really what I was most interested in. But I was thinking too, I could just learn a little bit about massage and maybe just use that as kind of like an easy job to sort of work around my graduate school training. And so I started thinking and toying with the idea of doing the massage school thing to just as sort of an easy way to learn more about the body was the main thing, and then just sort of integrate that into what I was doing. But like so many people, I got to massage school and I just got hooked immediately. This is just like, oh, this thing is really something incredible, something really special that's happening here. And so I just jumped headfirst into it, and I said, like, that's it for me. Going back for finishing my psychology degree, I'm way more interested in pursuing and seeing where this thing's going to take me. So that decision didn't go over real well with my parents at that time. It's like, you're quitting graduate school to go to massage school? What? But years later, of course, they certainly came around and became, huge fans of the whole field and what we were doing here.
Yeah, well, that's good to hear that they eventually came around. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah, I think there's probably a lot of us that have that kind of, when we tell our parents that we'll be going into massage therapy, they kind of have a little bit of apprehension.
Yeah. And this was massage therapy in the mid 1980s in the South. So it was not terribly well thought of, clearly. So yeah, there was all that overlying stuff on top of it as well.
Yeah, absolutely. A lot of misconceptions.
Hmm.
Um, Whitney, so I want to go back. What got you in that case? What initially drew you to psychology?
Well, I Actually, I'd had a background before that in music. I had thought from the time I was about 10 years old that I was going to be a musician, and I was just dead set on that. And went to, started my college career in music, and then eventually went to music school up in Boston, Berklee College of Music. And, that was kind of like the big wake up call for me of recognizing that making a living in music was going to be extremely difficult because I was surrounded by some of the most incredibly talented musicians that I had ever seen or experienced. And they were just starving, looking for, hoping that they were going to get lucky somewhere along the line and find a way to make a living out of this. And I just realized at that time that, you know, I'm not good enough to be in that ballpark of being able to make a living doing this kind of stuff when there's that many people out there who are struggling that hard. And so I was very lost, didn't know what I was going to do, and took a year off and traveled around the country, backpacking, just going everywhere, trying to get an idea like what to do with my life, sort of thing. And I had always been real fascinated, well, always been very fascinated with people, and I started reading a lot of sort of psychology, spirituality books, and things about personal growth development. I was just like, I really dig this stuff. This is really interesting. And so that kind of got me into the idea of like wanting to learn more about what makes people tick, what really is the thing behind them. And so went back to school, finished my undergraduate degree in psychology, and then immediately, like next quarter, started graduate school at Georgia State University in a counseling program. So that's kind of like what got me down that track.
Gotcha. Were you born and raised in Georgia?
Yeah, born in Atlanta and was raised in there. You can tell my Southern accent is still there a little bit, even though I've been gone for 30 plus years. I'm out in Oregon now. But yeah, that's where I grew up and did my initial training as well.
Gotcha. And if that had been the mid 1980s, that's long before Georgia had licensing
Oh, yeah.
this, right?
Yeah. Yeah,
Right.
absolutely. And that at that time, there was only one school in the state, and that was the Atlanta School of Massage. And I'm lucky that was in the, I don't think I probably would have done something like that if it hadn't been in the same town where I was living. So was super lucky that it was there. I would say not only lucky that it was there, also lucky that it was a really good school, a very talented pool of instructors there, and they were pulling a lot of talent into that area because of the orbit of a lot of those talented teachers there. So it was something I felt extremely lucky and valuable to be a part of that at that time.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Let's see. So have you just been in Georgia and Oregon in that case? If you
Yeah, basically those are the two places that I had lived, other than not counting the times that I was away in college at a couple different places. But yeah, those are the main two places that I have been. I've been in Oregon since 1994. So been out here quite over, I guess, yeah, just past 30 years out here now, which is amazing, hard to believe.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's pretty nice. I like the Pacific Northwest is a nice, beautiful area.
Yeah, when I was on that backpacking trip around the country I was telling you about, I came up here to Oregon and there was something that just absolutely resonated with this part of the country with me. It was like this is my vibration. I really, really belong here. So I kind of always thought that sometime I would get back out here and be here. So yeah, I'm very glad I did.
Excellent. All right. So tell me more about your initial massage therapy, your entry level training in Georgia.
Yeah, so at the Atlanta School of Massage, I was mentioning we had just an incredibly diverse group of very talented instructors there, and the two owners, Farah and Letitia Allen, had been doing the school only, I think, about maybe 7 or so years when I went to school there. But they had brought really, really talented teachers there and people who were staying around a long time. And there's something about refer to it as a talent vortex. That when you get a bunch of really qualified and talented people together, they all just bloom off each other. And that was happening there at that time. And it was spinning off a lot of really interesting people doing a lot of diverse and interesting different types of things. So I feel like I got a really broad approach to looking at massage. Our curriculum program was kind of like it was designed as one of those sort of like sample a little bit of this. Here's some shiatsu. Here's some energy work. Here's some neuromuscular therapy work. And here's see what you resonate with kind of thing. And, I had really intended when I went to school to stay in that realm of doing psychology oriented stuff and sort of the mind body kind of work. Um, so I was really interested in that kind of thing, but also took some other courses when I was both a student and then in the years after that that really sort of changed and shifted that thing for me. And part of that was too, some of my early work experiences were in chiropractic offices, and I was working with people who were, in pain. And I was thinking like, this is fascinating. This kind of stuff about what massage can do for some of these kind of people is really, and I think it really resonated with just my personality of being very sort of analytical, very science-minded person, and that whole idea of massage as a healthcare or medical approach really started to take hold, after a couple of years, mainly because of some of the work environments and other things that I had been doing at that time too, which um, we're all about being in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, so much of life comes down to that, I think.
Yeah.
So I'm interested, when you went into massage, did you expect it to kind of spark that kind of interest? Like, did you expect to find that when you signed up for massage classes?
Absolutely not. I mean, to me, it was just kind of like, this is a fun kind of thing that will be interesting and helpful for me. And then mainly it was like, I could do this to sort of work my own hours and do this around my graduate school stuff and thinking that maybe it might influence me a little bit. I had no idea. I had no idea the depth of what this really was going to turn into and the way it does things. And I saw that as a teacher because I stayed around at the massage school, after I got through and started being a teaching assistant and eventually got put in teaching positions. But year after year after year, you'd watch these groups of people come in, and all of us would just kind of like have this sort of smirk or smile on our face at the beginning, just saying like, "You have no idea how this is going to change your life." But it's going to. It's going to have a very, very significant impact on you,
Right.
regardless of whether you ever practice as a massage therapist. It's gonna change your life.
Oh yeah. I think I did a recent interview and we brought up, yeah, I think massage therapy school teaches you so much about yourself.
It does. Yeah. Yeah. It just you can't help it. You can't help but just, dive into some things that and explore places that you weren't aware of at all, I think. Yeah. That's what makes it so fun. That's what makes this work. That's what makes so many of these people stay in it for so long, I think, is because they're still doing that. They're still exploring the edges of where that's taken us.
Absolutely. Whitney, can you recall any specific texts that your instructors used for their instruction?
Yeah, so again, at this time, we really didn't have many textbooks in the massage field. We had Tappan's massage book, Francis Tappan's book, but we really didn't use it very much. Just the kind of like the beginnings of like, here's what Swedish massage is, and they kind of just introduced it. And Swedish massage gets kind of brushed off to the side in a lot of training programs. It's like, well, you do this just to get started, then you learn the real stuff, which I think is really unfortunate because I mean, it is the root of so much of what we do in so many other ways. And it's a very, very rich system. And it just really got kind of brushed aside. And that was mainly because the owner of the school, Fair Allen, had sort of developed a specific type of work, which they were calling deep tissue work at that time. And I know everybody uses that word in all kinds of different ways.
Right.
I think he was one of the early people to start using that word back in the 70s when with some things that he had put together. But a lot of our work in the school in terms of reference material was done based on a training manual that one of his chief or our chief curriculum director had put together, trying to consolidate Farah's work into an organized system that was taught to us. So we were sort of taught the Swedish and basic stuff first, and then we learned, a regional approach to all these deep tissue treatments and, foot and ankle, the forearm and the hand, the neck and the back, and all these different areas and everything. So that was kind of like the main content material we used. We did have a couple other, of course, we had, anatomy and physiology textbooks and anatomy coloring book. And that's kind of about what I remember in terms of the extent of textbook content that we had available for us.
All right. Um, at the time when you were going through massage therapy school, do you recall any local, regional, or even national big names that were really struck a chord with you or that you tried to follow or were really inspired by at the
Oh,
time?
absolutely. Yeah. The thing that was fascinating about Atlanta at this time was Atlanta's the biggest city in the South, and it was the only massage school in the state. And there weren't, I don't really know what was going on in other states, but I don't think there was another massage school in Alabama. There was, of course, a good number of them in Florida. I'm not sure about South Carolina, North Carolina, any of the other border states around Georgia. So we brought in a lot of students from other areas. And consequently, the same thing happened in the continuing education world, which is that all the major continuing education provide, well, not all, but a very large number of the major CE providers, if they wanted to come to the South, that's where they came. They came to Atlanta, and they often came to ASM, the Atlanta School of Massage, to do this. And we were super fortunate again, and I liken this back to that idea of the whole talent vortex of when you got a lot of talented pool of people around, they build off of each other because I often joke with people that there was something in the water down in Florida at that time because look at this whole area. Benny Vaughn, Scott Lamp, Paul St. John, Judith Delaney, John Upledger, Aaron Mattis, all these people were down in Florida. And a lot of that was because they were sort of intermixing with each other and really continuing to do great stuff. So they all came through Atlanta, and I was taking workshops with all these people and I even remember at one time I had been reading Leon Chato's soft tissue manipulation textbook, this old blue, a lot of people call it the old blue book, one of the first books that I think he wrote. And I said to our CE director, I said, like, I know this guy's in the UK, but you got to get him here. I said, this is really significant. You got to bring him here. And so they worked on for about a year, I think, trying to get him to come down here. And so on one of his, I think it may have been one of his first kind of circuits through the U.S., he came to the massage school there and came through. And of course, it was sold out and everybody was just blown away by what he was doing. But, I think, yeah, a lot of the people that were doing massage at that time, they were or taking a lot of these CE courses, especially if you were interested in pain and injury stuff. The big thing at that time was Paul St. John's NMT work. And it was kind of like if you were serious about dealing with pain problems, you took NMT. That was sort of like the thing to do. And I definitely took his courses, and I was like really super inspired by the things that I had learned there. But none of that for me compared to the impact that occurred when I met Benny Vaughn. And, he came through here and, I took a workshop with him. I didn't really know that much about him at that time. And I was a broke teaching assistant at the school, and the school director said, "Hey, we need somebody to help run logistics for this workshop with Benny Vaughn. We'll give you free, tuition to the course if you'll do the logistics." I said, "Sure, yeah, I'll do that." So I said, like, yeah, I'd like to learn. He's doing a sports massage class. I want to learn something about sports massage. So I took this class, and it was like floodgates came down for me because I had been taking all these courses about, you know, like CE method techniques, methodologies, do this kind of thing, do this kind of thing, and they were all about how do you do stuff. And Benny was the first person who ever really said anything in any kind of organized fashion about assessment. Like before you figure out what you're doing with somebody, you got to figure out what you're doing. Like, why are you doing this? What's the problem? What's the key thing you're trying to address with them? And to me, it was just kind of like a light bulb, like, yeah, that's like really obvious. And nobody seems to be doing this very much. And so I just got super hooked on his approach and what he was doing. And that, eventually led into a very long time of us working together in other things that, we'll talk about that in a little bit, but some of the things that we did, but that was such an eye opener for me more than anything else and has influenced my career in just immeasurable ways as well.
I think, Whitney, it's hard for someone like me where we came through massage therapy school where assessment is this huge, big thing. I
Mm.
imagine at the time, without assessment being such a key part of education, that it'd kind of be like wandering through a room completely in the dark with no flashlight.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's, not even that it wasn't a big part. It wasn't at all. There was nothing about it. And that's one of the things that just kind of struck a chord with me is thinking like, this really needs to be in massage school. This is important. This is super important for a lot of practitioners. And, we'll get to that part of the story later on in terms of like how I ended up creating some of those materials and focused around that kind of stuff. But it started a big long thing of looking at that whole piece in great detail that has, been part of my career for the last 35 plus years or whatever it's been. So, yeah.
Um, so just to close out a little bit more about your entry level education, Whitney, um, how long was your massage therapy program that you attended at ASM?
Yeah, it was 6 months. So it was a 6 month training program. And then, once I was out of that program, this happened to a lot of us. We didn't want to leave. There's just like, there's too much really cool stuff happening here. We didn't want to leave. And so I, hung around as a teaching assistant, which, basically is sort of like a glorified gopher in the classroom for doing this. And then the way they had it structured was the teaching assistant was the person that the teacher would work on to demonstrate techniques and stuff like that to the classes. So your role was to kind of be a body and then just kind of help out in a little bit of stuff. So I did that for a little bit of time and eventually ended up, and that's kind of another story we'll get to of like the whole process of starting to teach came on pretty quickly, which I don't agree with at all, but it's done a lot in massage schools of people being put in those teaching positions way before they're ready to be. So, but yeah, that was kind of the crux of that entry level education. But for me also, I'm a voracious learner. I like was studying all kinds of stuff outside of school at the same time. So, um, you know, the teachers there would tell us, go read this book, or go check this out, or do this course, or do this kind of thing. And I was always trying to do as much as I, ran up big credit card bills, buying CE workshops and all these other resources and things like that later on. But, that's it. When you're in it and it's rich and it's feeding you, you gotta pursue it. You gotta go after it.
I can definitely relate to those kind of feelings, Whitney.
Yeah.
So did ASM, or did, I guess if Georgia wasn't regulating, there were no minimum hours required for your education.
No, I think that was, they were basing it on at that time, the AMTA had a 500-hour requirement. I think it was a 500-hour requirement for membership in the AMTA, I believe. And there was that was the beginning of rumblings of trying to get some sort of national standards kind of thing going. Bob King had been super active with the AMTA and really driving the organization towards professionalism. And one of the big sort of impetus of that was trying to talk about both upping the standards in some of the schools, but also having some degree of standardization across the country in this. And we never, of course, never really achieved standardization, but that was kind of the model at that time was the 500-hour training program. And ASM's program ended up being a little bit longer, if I remember correctly, maybe even as much as 600 hours or something like that, I think, just because that's how long it turned into with all the things that they wanted to get in there. But that nobody was doing any kind of financial aid or any of that kind of stuff at that time either.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So talk to me a little bit about what would happen after, if there was no license at the end of your education. I mean, I know you went in as a teacher's assistant afterwards, but like what did it look like? I can't imagine a world without licensing or a state without licensing.
Yeah, I mean, it's just kind of like go do what you want to do. I mean, and people did that. I mean, and I did that kind of thing. It was like, all right, I'm going to work out of my home. I'm going to work at a health club. I'm going to work at a chiropractic office. I did all kinds of different things, trying to find, different ways to do that. And probably within a year, I think it was maybe even within a year or so, opened up my own clinic in a medical office building because I was trying to sort of, connect with the medical community. And I didn't know what the hell I was doing. It's just kind of like you're flying by the seat of your pants. And this is one of the things that really made me realize how incredibly deficient um, my education was. And this is, right about the same. This is, I think this was actually may have been after I had maybe taken that first course with Benny or something like that. I remember this situation. I had a client come in, like I had this office in this medical office building, and tried to network. My former wife's father was a pharmacist in the building, so he sort of helped us get a place in this building, which is really very valuable. And of course, he knew all the doctors. So I thought, like, man, this is an inn. This is a great inn. And so he sort of convinced some of the doctors to, like, hey, give these kids a chance, And so um, I had this doctor sent a patient down one day, and she came in and she was clearly in very serious pain. And she said, Doctor so and so sent me down here to see you, and I'm hoping you can help me out. So I had, had her fill out the form, do all the things that I know I was told to do in massage school, and tried to talk to her about, getting on the table to get ready and everything. And I see her kind of like looking at the massage table, and I can kind of see what's going through her head. Just kind of this idea of like, I don't know if I could get on this massage table. And I'm thinking the same thing, but I'm trying not to say this to her and let her know that I'm also, really, I don't know what's going on here. But the other thing I was thinking in my head, which I was really trying hard not to convey to her, is that I have no idea what's wrong with this woman. And I don't know if I'm going to hurt her. I don't know if I'm going to help her. I don't know what I'm doing. And that was kind of like, again, one of those watershed moments that made me realize, 'cause as soon as she was out of the office, I was back, pulling Janet Travell's books off the shelves. I'm like, where do you find what's wrong? How do you figure out what's wrong with people? And that was another one of those sort of, hit you in the head with a hammer kind of things. It's just saying like, you've got to learn about how to make some of those kind of evaluation decisions. And that's all about assessment. And so that came at the right time for me in terms of, just starting to get introduced to Benny's work and that whole process, and recognizing how critically important that was.
Right. So talk to me about the transition from student to practitioner to teacher's assistant.
Yeah, those things were all kind of happening at the same time, and I have always been absolutely fascinated with education. So I clearly gravitated toward the idea of wanting to get involved with teaching, just because I really love the concept and the ideas of education. This has always been a super important thing to me. And, you know, practicing at that time was felt like I was learning some things, but I just thought I could learn a lot more if I was doing some other different types of things. So as a teaching assistant, this became really apparent to me too, which is, at this time, I'm probably like 26, 27 years old, something like that. Or, yeah. Anyway, when I was that age, I looked super, super young. I mean, I really looked like I was about 17 years old. I always have looked really young. And so I'd go in the classroom and, clearly at this time, the people who were coming to massage school, you didn't have a whole lot of the 18-year-old kids right out of high school sort of thing that we see a lot more of that now. This was mostly mid 20s and up and older adults and a lot of career changers and things like that. And they're coming in here and, many of these people are 10, 20, some 30 years my senior. And I'm supposed to be an educator person in the classroom. And like, there is no way I'm going to get any respect from these people,
Yeah.
looking like this kid. And I really thought the only way that I'm ever going to get respect from these people is if I really, really, really know my stuff up and down. And so that made me a voracious studier and learner to just try to, really, really make sure I knew everything. One of my teachers in massage school had said this to me one time. Like she said, I go into class with the 120% rule or something like that, she called it. She said, I prepare for 120% of what I think I'm going to do in there. So you're always preparing above and beyond what you think you're going to accomplish or get to in there so that you are, in the realm of being able to handle what's going to come up and be done there.
Mm.
So yes, and having some really outstanding teachers there to model after and to work with was super helpful because the teacher training we got in terms of training how to be a teacher was nil. It was just really, this is just what happened, and it still happens to this day a lot. People just get thrown in the classrooms like, "Oh, you were a good student. Why don't you go teach?" And people really don't have a respect for what's involved with being a good teacher, and think that just anybody can do it. And there's this thing too, like, "Oh, well, you're a successful practitioner. You'll be a good teacher." Not necessarily true. Not necessarily true at all. So there is absolutely an art and a skill to it. And I've seen over the years and watched this, there are people who are naturals, who are absolute naturals at it, who don't have to work that hard, and they're really, really good at it. And there's other people just really struggle. And there's some people that just study it a lot to try to learn to be better, and they work hard at it. And so, it's important to find out where you are if you're interested in doing some of that kind of stuff, to share those things with people. That's critically important.
Gotcha. Uh, and yeah, I couldn't agree more about I think this profession could stand to do a little bit with cutting our confidence in half when it
Mm,
comes to what our actual abilities are.
mm.
I understand it's tough to be an administrator in a school and you have to have someone there to provide the education. Um, but man, we want to make sure that we're providing the right kind of education and turning out the best therapists we possibly can when they get
Y-
out.
Yeah, absolutely. And unfortunately, this is kind of a bigger topic, but what ended up happening with the explosion of massage schools that happened from 2000, roughly 4 or 5, on through about 2010, 2012, with that massive explosion in the number of schools, is we had hundreds and hundreds of training programs across the country churning out therapists with teachers who were not good, because there just simply aren't enough qualified teachers to staff 1,400 massage schools in the country. And so I honestly believe that we created an entire generation of subpar, substandard massage therapists, unfortunately, who just did not get, it's not their fault, but they went to training programs where they did not get good instruction. And so, and I watched this happen as a continuing education provider. Of the quality of students that were coming into the continuing education programs was a lot better in 2003 and 1999 than it was in 2010, because of that, I think. So, um, interesting to see where that will go as we have slimmed down the number of schools now to a lot smaller number. But there's still a lot of programs out there that have programs that were a lot better, or maybe could really stand to be significantly improved.
Yeah, I think in the interest of predicting the future, I think we'll be dealing with the ramifications of that for a while longer.
Yeah, yeah.
So talk to me about how you got started writing the orthopedic manuals.
Yeah, so this happened, mainly. Um, well, let me kind of backtrack a little bit, because this is a very important part of this. I've mentioned this, my relationship with Benny, but this has to go deeper. Because this is really crucial. I was at the massage school in Atlanta I'd become a teacher there, and the school owners decided that they wanted to create a program that was exclusively devoted from the get-go for massage therapists who wanted to learn to work with pain and injury conditions, kind of along the sports realm, but also, of a wide variety of pain and injury conditions. I had also, at the same time, been working in an incredible work opportunity that I got to work with Emory University's orthopedic clinic that was affiliated with the medical school. So, we were using massage in that clinic for all kinds of stuff. It was interesting when it first started out. I happened to have a connection and know one of the physical therapists that were there, and they were just getting ready to build and start this new orthopedic clinic. And they said, "Hey, we're thinking about bringing massage in here. Are you interested?" And I said, like, yeah, of course. And they were going to pay me. I think it was like $13 an hour was my starting pay. But I said, like, I don't care. This is going to be me getting paid to go to school, basically, in this kind of environment. And so I had started work there. At the same time, I had also gone back to graduate school again to study sports medicine and biomechanics. So I was getting really interested in the whole medical thing. So I went back to Georgia State and started another master's degree program in sports medicine and biomechanics. Started working at this clinic at Emory. And they kind of started out with, they put me at this room at the very far end of this big long hallway. And it sort of started with this kind of, the PTs didn't know what to make of me, and the other orthopedists didn't know what to make of this massage thing. And so they'd have patients that they would come in and like they weren't being successful with these certain patients. Well, send them to the massage guy. It was kind of like, just get this person off my books. I don't want to deal with them. Send them to the massage guy. And lo and behold, a lot of those people started getting better. And, they would come out of this room after having a treatment, just saying like, "Oh man, I feel so much better." And they start talking to some of the other patients in the hallway, and the other people are going like, "I want that, you know, I want that experience too." And so it really opened up the communications between us in a way that was super, super helpful, because then we started more of a dialogue of learning about each other. And this was the whole idea of interprofessional relationships, of really learning more about what each other does. And so we'd sit around and have conversations about, why you do this, why you do this kind of stuff. And then, every day when I went into work, if I, had an empty slot on my schedule, I'm just following the PTs around. Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Why are you doing that? Tell me what you're doing here. And went on rounds with the orthopedist, sat in on intakes with them. And it's like, tell me why you do this kind of thing. Tell me why you do that. And so it was a super, super valuable learning experience. When people talk about the number of years that you're in practice, I mean, you can be in practice for 25 years and do the same massage for 25 years on people and not really make significant advancements. But I had like, I don't know, decades worth of time just compressed into that very short period of time, because I saw all kinds of absolutely wacky, crazy things that I would never think massage could be used for. And we were just experimenting. It was like, they'd say, "Hey, do you think massage can help us?" I'm like, "I have no idea. Let's try it and see." And so, I was doing that thing with Emory, and then also with my graduate school program. And then the owners of the massage school said, "We want to start this program focusing on teaching massage therapists, about treating pain and injury problems. And this is going to be the main focus. It's going to be very medical, clinical oriented kind of things. And what we're going to do is we're going to bring Benny Vaughn in here to be the curriculum coordinator, and he's going to sort of design the whole curriculum. But we need somebody on the staff, on the teaching staff, to basically run the program. And also, you're going to get to work with Benny on a regular, ongoing basis in the development of this program." And I was like, "Oh my God, this is so incredible. What an opportunity." But I can't do this Emory thing, graduate school, and this thing with Benny, and develop this program. I can't do all these things. I just can't handle it. So I said, something's got to go. Well, graduate school's got to go again.
Oh.
So second master's degree out the window. But I said, like, I am not going to get another opportunity to do something to this magnitude with somebody like Benny. Like, you don't pass that up. And so, and that started off a, very, very long, now 30 plus, of course, year relationship with the two of us. And I owe so much of my work and success to that time that we spent together, where I learned so much from him, not only about massage, but all about teaching and about, interactions and communicating with other healthcare professionals and all this kind of stuff, all the magnificent things that he had experience doing. And I just, tried to embody that stuff as much as possible. And so we were together doing that kind of thing for several years together at the program. And then just about the time he was starting to pull away from that program to take over the Olympics stuff in Atlanta in '94, was at the same time that I was leaving Atlanta to go out west and move to Oregon. So, and that's a whole nother big long story of like, that's how I got started writing the materials, was when I got out to Oregon. I had been wanting to produce educational materials for massage therapists for a long time. And that's how that whole thing kind of got started. Is sort of another big, sort of long accidental story of how that happened, but that's how it got started.
Life is full of happy accidents.
It is, yeah. Yeah, it is. And I was, actually, my former wife and I had intended to move to Colorado. We were going to move to Boulder because we had sort of heard that this was sort of like the bodywork mecca out west kind of thing. There's all the Rolfe Institute and the Boulder College and all kind of things happening there. We got to Boulder and just couldn't find an affordable place to live there. And we had these two cats with us, and nobody would let us have these cats. And just like we were sitting around this hotel room, like, what are we going to do? Where we go? And she said, well, you've always said you want to go back to Oregon. Why don't we just go to Oregon? Like, you can't just like pick up and go another, 1,500 miles away to Oregon. And she said, why not? And I couldn't come up with a good enough reason why not to do it. So we just went and got in the car and drove to Oregon and didn't know where we were going to be going or anything like that. We got to Oregon and settled in and ended up on this tiny little place on the coast of Oregon, which was a beautiful setting and everything. I thought, like, I'll just go build a practice in the town down the road. Well, I didn't realize when I got there, because we weren't planning to move to Oregon, that I couldn't start work until the next licensure test came around, because Oregon had licensure and Georgia didn't. And they said, well, when is the next licensure test? They told me, well, that's in December. And this was in July. And I was like, so I can't work for 6 months. Is that right? And I said, like, yeah, that's right. And we were in this very remote part of the Oregon coast. And I thought, like, what am I going to do? And it was that point I realized, like, okay, I've been given 6 months with no work, nothing to do but a quiet, sequestered place. I've been wanting to create massage educational materials for massage therapists for a long time. Now I finally have the space and the opportunity to do it. So basically just lived off my credit cards for 6 months and started writing educational materials, which I thought really were going to be beneficial for massage schools, mostly about assessment. And I got really serious about this. Like, I think there's a business in producing educational materials for massage therapists. And so I, wrote out a comprehensive business plan, did all this kind of stuff, and went to a couple banks and said, like, here's a plan, like, for something that I want to, get a loan to start this business. And they read this thing over and they're like, wow, this sounds really interesting. Good luck.
Oh,
Because, you know, I didn't have any collateral. I had no other money or anything like that. And they thought, like, this is interesting, but we're not going to bet on this guy for without any other kind of resources behind it or anything. So basically bootstrapped that thing and just got it started that way.
what year did the first book come out, Whitney?
Well, let's see, 1995, I think it was. Yeah, 1995. And that was the first edition. Now this was Kirby, really rudimentary early desktop self-publishing stuff where the pictures were we weren't still yeah, well, the very, very first edition of this was something I had started when I was back in Atlanta at the massage school, and we were still scotch taping photographs onto paper and going to Kinko's and running off copies of this. So that was the level of where we are
Oh,
at in that. But by the mid 90s, once I got out to Oregon, this was a fascinating time too, because this was the beginning of basically the self-publishing industry was just getting started with, Adobe PageMaker and Quark Express and some of those other programs that were capable of doing desktop publishing. And so this was happening right at that same time. And I was a computer nerd to some degree too, and really starting to get and seeing the possibilities of what this kind of stuff could do in the education realm of bringing more things to fruition with producing these kind of materials. So the early versions of that book, really bad, but it was something, it was something to get started.
got to have a foundation, no matter
Yeah.
how shaky it looks in hindsight, right?
Yeah, that's right. There's always the what do you call it now, the MVP, the minimum viable product. And it was definitely minimally viable.
But it was a product.
It was a product. Yeah.
Thank goodness, too.
Right.
Whitney, I'm going to take us on a detour. I
Mhm.
don't want to go too far away from computers, though, because I know you have an interesting history with online education.
Mhm.
But I want to just talk a little bit about that move from Georgia to Oregon in terms of cultural changes, but also I've been waiting a little while for me to reveal this fact, but Oregon, like you said, had a practice act for a long time by the time you got around. Oregon and Arkansas both got their practice act in the same year in 1951. We were one
Oh,
of,
I didn't know it was that old.
it is that old.
Wow.
Oregon and Arkansas were one of the first five in the nation to have a practice act or to regulate massage therapy.
Uh,
So I just want to know about the difference between going from Georgia, where there was no licensing, to Oregon, where they had licensing. I understand you had to wait a while before you could work and take your exam at the time, but were there other cultural shifts, other differences in the massage profession that you?
oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, the big difference that I noticed, I mean, clearly the one that impacted me financially was the licensure thing, but culturally, you're absolutely right. Because still, even at the time that I was doing the things that I was doing in Atlanta, when I told, went to a party or whatever, told people I was a massage therapist, like, oh, massage therapist. Go out to Oregon and tell people I'm a massage therapist, oh, cool, that sounds cool. And like they knew what it was and it was accepted. And it was just kind of like, yeah, that's cool. We know about that out here. So I loved that aspect of it being more accepted and more sort of significant developments in a lot of the things that were here. There is an interesting geographical thing, though, that I have noticed. And this is something that has plagued me as a CE provider over the years, too, which is that once you get west of the Mississippi, the states get bigger.
Yeah.
And the bigger the states are, the more spread out people are. More spread out they are, the less they interact with each other. And so that concentration of people and talent and things like that that happens in the East Coast and for me in the South of all those people being close to each other and interacting with each other builds a lot of stuff. And it felt a lot to me like when I got out here, things were just scattered in a way that didn't allow that same degree of cross pollination. I mean, there was all kinds of cool stuff that had come out of the Bay Area with Esalen and all this sort of stuff. And there's a lot of things happening. There's a lot of stuff happening up in Seattle with Heide Brennecke and Brian Utting and Seattle Massage School and all this. There's some really good, there's another good talent vortex up there. But there was just like these isolated sort of pockets. And then there's a lot of spread out in between them just because of the geography. Um, and I think that's still true. I think that's still true.
Hmm, that's interesting. I've never thought of or heard it put quite like that, but yeah, I can get that.
That's the same reason too that one of the big reasons that I got interested in online education is because, I'm looking at the map and thinking like, how often do these big name providers come to Casper, Wyoming? They don't. And if you live in Casper, Wyoming or within 300 miles of it, too bad. You know, you're on an airplane flying to Denver to go do something, and that's expensive. And I wanted massage therapists to have access to the best education possible, no matter where they were. And so that is certainly one of the things that some of the online stuff has been able to bring us. Granted, there are things that are still best done in a classroom type of environment, but there's so much that you can do in that sort of way now, and that's been for me a big drive behind it is the equalizer, a big equalizer of education and access to education.
It could certainly go a lot to, like we talked about earlier, the standardization that I think is craved,
Yeah,
despite as much as it is also resisted.
yeah.
I think online education could definitely do with that. So tell me, can you talk a little bit about the evolution that you've witnessed of online massage education and where you think it's going, where you think it has succeeded, stuff like that?
Yeah, and I think we could say that to a large extent about online education across the board because, I became super, super interested and passionate not only about the things that were going on in the massage field with my specialty focus of orthopedics and biomechanics and that kind of stuff, but I am super super interested in learning science and educational theory and instructional design and those concepts about what makes a good educational experience. And to see this across the board in a lot of places that our traditional education it's falling short in a lot of different ways. And there's a funny story that's related in the education community about what's called the Rip Van Winkle syndrome, which is, the story of Rip Van Winkle is a guy who falls asleep for like 20 years or something like that, and then he wakes up and the whole world is different around him and everything. And so the way the Rip Van Winkle story goes is, this person fell asleep in the late 1800s or early 1900s, and they wake up and they're walking around today, and like the world is so different, they can't figure out anything about what's going on until they walk into a school. And there's like, oh, I know what this is. This is a school. It looks just like it did when I was in training. Kids are in desks sitting there listening to somebody talk to them. This is a school. And education hasn't changed that much in that period of time until recently, mainly because of the influence of online education. But the world around us has changed dramatically. And in terms of preparing students for how to be self-directed learners in the future, I think a lot of that kind of stuff has to change. And I wanted to mention this because I definitely noticed this trend in the other people that you had interviewed for this series. I've listened to the first three episodes with Sandy and David and Benny. Uh, but outside of them, just like you look at the main, if you try to think like who are some of the biggest, most influential people in our field, without a doubt, you will find one consistent thing across the board with all those people. They are self-directed, self-motivated learners. And that's a big thing, is finding a way to get that kind of inspiration to people to like, how do you get yourself to learn more? How do you really push yourself to learn more? And that is one of the things that I really wanted to start doing with online education. And I saw the potential. What got me started on this was teaching in the classroom on the sort of 2-day weekend workshop format. I was trying to teach relatively complex clinical reasoning skills about assessment because it's not something where you can just lecture content to people. It's about critical thinking processes and problem solving. And that's really difficult, and especially difficult to do that in like the 2-day weekend format. And I would talk to people and give them, all kinds of great information about all these conditions or whatever. Then I'm ask them a question to apply that knowledge to a new and different situation. And I get this deer in the headlights to look like, I don't know, you didn't tell us that. It's like, well, that's the point is, you know, this is what's going to happen when you go back to work on Monday. You're going to have a situation where somebody comes in and it's not going to be handed to you. The answer is not going to be handed to you. You have to figure this out. And so I recognize that this particular format was not the way to do this kind of stuff. And I started looking into how online education was being used in the medical fields and some of the other places where they're trying to teach more complex reasoning processes, and saw the potential for trying to do some of this kind of stuff with more case-based learning where it was more realistic instead of just lecturing people about stuff, where you had simulations of things happening, or more realistic kind of scenarios to apply that sort of learning content. And so I really started looking at different ways that we could try to bring that into what we were doing with the massage world. And started off, I mean, in the early days, it was pretty rudimentary because I remember launching my first online course, I think in about 2005, 2006 or something like that. Still had a lot of people on dial-up connections.
Yeah.
So we weren't doing any kind of video or multimedia or any of that kind of stuff. And it was really very text-based. And a lot of the online education at that point was very like take what you do in the classroom and just put it on the web, make people read a bunch of PDF documents and then give them a multiple choice test. And the big problem with online education was also one of its benefits, which was, it's really easy to make an online course, but it's also really hard to make a good online course. And so that's the big struggle. It's like technology made it easy to put stuff up there, but there's a lot more that goes into the instructional design of a good quality educational experience.
Yeah, I mean, I started teaching for the school that I attended um, in February of 2020. So right before everything shut down.
Oh yeah, right.
Like, it was a struggle enough for us to figure out how to put content up for the students
Yeah.
during that. I can't imagine. what you must have went through trying to create good quality programs and content for students at that time.
Yeah, it was certainly a challenge, and but what it made me do was it made me dig deeper into the instructional design process about what does real learning look like, and what does real, not just like throw content up there, but how do you get people to reason and think and apply concepts across these domains to new and different scenarios and situations and things like that. So, it's been a constant evolution and constant evolving process, but fascinating to watch those developments now as well.
I feel like I need you to teach us all of your secrets, Whitney, that you learned from that.
Yeah. Well, on my bucket list, and I've got you always talk about these projects that are on the back burners of your stove. And I was talking to someone about this one day. She goes like, "Man, you got a big stove," because it's got a lot of back burners. But I would love the idea of creating a comprehensive teacher training program that really did delve into training teachers, because I think we've had some things that have approached that and gotten some of those pieces, but I haven't seen anything that I really felt like delved into the realm of the design of instruction to that level of detail that really needs to happen.
Well, don't let that go too far on your back burner, Whitney.
Yeah,
We arched for something
right.
like that in the profession, so move that one up a few.
Yeah, perhaps so. Yeah, perhaps so.
Um, all right, so let's talk a little bit, if we can shift gears. Tell me about your involvement with the national organizations.
Yeah, so early on, and this again was another influence from Benny, I think, because at the time that he and I first started working together was the time that he was executive vice president of AMTA. I recognized the importance and value of becoming active as a volunteer and doing things on the national level, just because that's what moves the profession forward. So I got involved on a number of different things, spoke at some of the conferences and things like that, but did some work on national committees and eventually got involved with the National Certification Board because I was also interested in the whole realm of credentialing practitioners and where that whole thing was going as well. So those were important. And then there was all kinds of other committee work from this organization, that organization, a lot of things that have just kind of like escaped memory now. But some other fascinating things too with my work for a number of years with an organization called ACAC, which was at that time the Academic Consortium for Complementary and Academic Consortium for Complementary and Alternative Healthcare, and now it's a different name, um, ACIH, I think it is now. But it was a group of alternative healthcare professions. They were the licensed healthcare professions that were in the sort of realm of alternative healthcare and trying to, again, break down the barriers and silos between these organizations of other people in these fields, acupuncture and chiropractic and, some of those other areas to try to make a more integrated healthcare system and say, like, what can we learn from each other? What are our common struggles? What are the challenges that we have? How can we do a better job of letting the traditional educational medical education system know what we do, and how can we know what they do better, and all those kinds of things. So those are all very important things that I think are valuable for people to get involved with and recognize the bigger picture. It's hard now to get good volunteers to stay around with stuff because people are busy. I mean, I certainly get it, but it is really important for the future and growth of our profession as much as possible for people. So my encouragement is get involved. Get involved and do some things, make some contributions there because we all need it.
Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, the more of us that get involved and volunteer, the less work there is to do.
That's true. Yep, that is absolutely true. Yeah.
Talk to me a little bit. Let's talk about AMTA, the American Massage Therapy Association. How have you seen a change from when you first started presenting with them to what they look like nowadays?
Yeah, I think both, again, listening to some of your previous episodes, both Sandy and David encapsulated this really well with their discussions about AMTA being initially run predominantly by massage therapy, people who were directly related to the outcomes of what was happening in the profession. And they got it and saw it, and they had some big initiatives and big ideas and things. And this whole sort of transition and trajectory from, Bob King's leadership to Elliot Green's leadership and to the other people that had come immediately after them, seemed like there was a really strong move of cohesion with that organization toward things that were going to really support and build up the profession. And sometime after that, it really felt like the organization again, and I think David had mentioned this, it got so big that they needed a lot more infrastructure to manage the size of the organization. And consequently, once you build up the larger infrastructure, there's a tendency to become a little bit less connected with what's going on a day-to-day basis. I mean, I saw the National Certification Board do the same thing. Got very disconnected from what their mission was, and it was all about the management company that was running it, and it just led to a real dysfunctional period for that organization as well. So I think we see that same sort of thing happening with these organizations trying to grapple with size and relevance and what they continue to stand for. And it just feels a little bit like I'm not going to say that we've lost our way, but lost some of the mission-driven things that used to keep those organizations really at the forefront of everybody's attention.
Yeah. All right. I respect that.
Yeah.
What about your involvement with ABMP? How did that come to be?
Same thing of just sort of like doing some stuff over the years with sending in articles to their magazines, and then that just sort of started in more articles and then more articles, and then going to the ABMP school forums, and it's a different organization in that they get to kind of decide what they want to do and what they kind of want to put emphasis on, and it feels to me as if that organization has kept the interests of its members closer to the forefront of really what are they developing and what are they making that's going to really be beneficial for those members. And so I applaud them for doing that. And then they have continued to, over the years, put money and resources into things that were really beneficial for our profession. And they produce an outstanding magazine, and the digital stuff that they produce, the things that they make available with their webinar series, and the emphasis on supporting a lot of the other initiatives and getting a lot of their people involved with things like the ELAP project and some of those kinds of things that really are beneficial in the long run for the long-lasting support of both schools and for students as well. So I think both organizations do certain things well, and both organizations have things that I think we could say like, I would love to see this done a little bit differently or something like that. But they definitely have sort of different flavors to them. But my take on it has certainly been that the ABMP has really kept, if you want to make a computer analogy, they've kept user experience on the forefront, much more so. And that's been a benefit for a lot of people, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. If we have time, Whitney, could we talk about your experience as editor for the Massage Therapy Foundation's journal and the NCBTMB and your experience with that organization?
Yeah, so my time with the IJTMB was pretty short of doing. I was the education section editor, so we had articles that would come into the journal, and actually, not a lot of them were about education. So that there wasn't a lot of activity in that section of the journal. Much more about techniques and measuring things and stuff like that related to massage methods and things like that. We did get some education stuff every once in a while, but it wasn't a whole lot of stuff. And the IJTMB is something that I really wish had picked up more traction from our profession as a really relevant publication for people to pay attention to. But part of this, you can't divorce this from the reality, which is that in massage therapy, we are not an academic based profession. Most of our education is still that sort of legacy education model, or the sort of, the passing this on from guru to student kind of thing, that whole model of education, not one that's really based in academia, which is all about understanding complexities of different arguments and how to make a good analytical debate, how to critique things and stuff like that. So an academic journal like that is hard to really hard to make it popular amongst the people of that really need to do that. So yeah, it was unfortunate. I think that it's still out there, it's still doing things, and people do still submit stuff to it. So, get it, read it, folks. It's important, So, but the time on the National Certification Board, I was 3 years on the board and 1 year as chair. And this was during a time where, I mean, I have to admit, during a time where the National Certification Board was coming pretty darn dysfunctional, in my opinion, because it was being run by the management company, I think, predominantly for profit reasons, not for the whole purpose of advancing our profession with the certification models, is what it had really been originally designed to do. And I personally think one of the problems that has continued to plague the national certification model for a long time is just this idea that there's still been an effort to try to please everybody and do something where this credential is really, uh, uh, you know, focusing on all kinds of things for all different sorts of people. And that's not what credentialing is about. It seems to me, at least, I think, since we have these two big divisions in the massage profession. If you want to kind of look at it this way, that division of massage as a sort of wellness enhancement model, and then we have massage as a healthcare model. And I think our entry level education does a pretty good job of preparing people for the wellness enhancement model of massage therapy. It does a terrible job of preparing people to be a healthcare provider. And so the national certification process and the national certification exam could be the next step of what really is preparing you to be doing that sort of thing. And they've definitely moved in an effort in that direction to try to do that, but I don't think it has been as comprehensive as the effort really needs to be to establish this as a valid and sought after credential that indicates that massage therapists are more well prepared to be acting as a healthcare provider.
Yeah, wouldn't it be great if we had something for all these people that we see, perhaps on our social medias that say, I want to be credentialed in, I want to be certified in medical massage. If there was, the board
Right.
certification answered those prayers for those people, right?
Yeah. And part of it is that just we have, and this is certainly relevant when you're talking about history of massage. We have argued for decades about these terms, about what it is that we do, and what is this kind of thing, and what is that kind of thing. And we've got these modality empires that feel like, well, I don't want their stuff to be on the test if my stuff isn't on the test. And so when you still have that kind of challenge of getting any standard of what we're covering or what this is about, it still makes it really difficult to get buy-in for the whole process. And that's kind of where we still are, I think.
Well, there's always tomorrow.
That's right. Yep. It may still happen. Yep. It may still happen. My hair is getting grayer and falling out. I'm not sure how much longer I'll be around to watch it come to fruition, but it's all about evolution. It's all about evolution.
Yeah. Um, all right, let's close out a little bit. Talk to me about how you got involved teaching internationally, Whitney.
You know, um, I haven't done a whole lot of this, and it's all been by invitation to come to a few other places, New Zealand, Australia, and some stuff down in Costa Rica. Um, I have not spent a lot of time outside the country for a number of reasons. Some of it having to do with the work that I'm focused on here, but also a lot of it has to do with it's a little bit challenging for me to be away from home for long extended times because I also help my wife extensively with her work here at our house with a wild bird rehabilitation facility. So um, it's it's difficult, even sometimes on the weekend workshops, it's difficult for me to get away for longer periods of time. So I've really tried to limit some of that kind of extensive long travel. I've missed out on a lot of opportunities because of that. But that's the choice that I've made, and this work that we do here is really important on that front as well. So that's something I still would continue to do because I support it very strongly.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up too, because I feel like I've seen an interview where you've had like a parrot on your shoulder.
Yeah, there's frequently all kinds of crazy bird activity happening here at the house. So most of what her work is about is wild birds, but we do have a couple of parrots that are rescue, parrots that we have here. But yeah, and there's some just crazy, super wild stories about the things that we have ended up doing because of this work with helping some of these wild birds. And it's been fascinating because, my knowledge of orthopedics and injury management also becomes very relevant there. And pretty darn challenging because your patients don't ever respond to you when you're trying to do range of motion tests and ask them if it hurts. So um, you have to figure out some different ways to do that kind of stuff. So.
Now, bringing that up, I can't help but ask the question, do you think that that has helped your practice?
Oh yeah. Yeah, because I've really begun to look broader at systems, health systems, environmental systems, and just the connections of what we are, and thinking again about we see animals frequently as a species group. Like you see, oh, there's a robin. It's one of a bunch of robins. But when you have them in rehab, it's like, no, that's, Daisy or whatever, call them or whatever, something. You realize every one of them is an individual as well. And so it just reminds me again of how much people are absolute individuals, and making that connection with those individuals is a crucial part of the success that we'll have in treatment,
Hmm,
regardless of what your treatment is.
that's beautiful. I love that,
Yeah.
Whitney. Thank you. I'm glad that was brought up.
Yeah.
All right, let's talk a little bit about massage therapy history since that's what we're here with the podcast for. How have you seen, or what significant trends have you noticed, witnessed, since your entry days?
Well, there's clearly been a few that are quite impactful. One of the big things that comes to mind is that I don't think many of us saw the franchise thing coming,
Hmm.
um, as powerful as it has been as an influence and a change in our profession. So that's been certainly one of the big things that I think has impacted a lot. And I don't certainly I think and this is something you and I both alluded to earlier, is the whole explosion of acceptance of massage, driven at the same time that we were seeing the misuses of federal financial aid programs and everything that drove up the number of massage schools, and the this is something I think David Lauterstein alluded to, the corporate buyouts of some of the very best massage schools that we had in the country by large, profit-driven investor groups, and things that just like very detrimentally impacted us. So those have been some hard hits that I think we've had to find ways to overcome. Um, but at the same time, one of the other things that I will say that has been very fascinating, and is, as much as we all kind of like, hate social media a lot, um, it has made that connection across the globe in a way that nothing else could possibly have done. So that, I like, with the podcast I run, we have guests from all over the world, and I get to talk to some just absolutely incredible educators and practitioners all over the place, or I just talk to them on Facebook, and just so and so is on there talking about something, and you can have discussions with these people. That's a great way. When I was early in practice, it was very much of a isolationist kind of thing, because there wasn't a lot of opportunity to get out, meet with, and talk with other people or interact with them at all. So that has been something that I think has dramatically accelerated understanding and acceptance of a lot of other types of things that we wouldn't have had easy access to.
Yeah. Well, and I like that you've also harkened back to talking about the cultural acceptability of massage therapy.
Mhm.
And to go back to a point you made earlier about we're seeing more and more younger people get into massage therapy education, I
Yeah.
definitely see those two related to each other.
Yeah. And I hope some of those people will really stick around a while because one of the other things that's troubling to me is that, um, during the time that I was sort of coming up, and this would be like, I'm talking like 90s, 2000s, the 80s time period, again, lots of really talented people that were leading us forward into new endeavors and new adventures. And those folks we're getting old, we're getting old and getting, toward the end of our time period of making those contributions. And there doesn't seem to be as much energy sometimes from as many of that younger generation in doing some of this kind of stuff. And we need it, man. We really need it. So, my encouragement is to people to get out there and do some things and make some impacts and changes.
Absolutely. I would echo that 100%.
Yeah.
What do you feel is the importance of preserving massage therapy's history?
Well, I think some of your other guests and anybody, you ask anybody about the importance of history, they'll all say the same thing is, the big thing is let's try not to make the same mistakes over again, and that's an important thing. But there's also some other things too about recognizing connections and how things developed that make you understand or a particular framework for something. Um, like just to give you an example of that, and this is something I'm going to ask you, being a history buff, I'm going to give you, I did not get to validate this thing. So this is something you can dive into and dig into. Maybe you can find it and find the answer for me.
Okay.
Um, most of our listeners are probably familiar with having heard of James Syriax,
Yeah.
the British orthopedic physician who was so commonly referred to as sort of the popularizer of deep transverse friction massage for or treatments.
Sure.
And this had always kind of like bugged me, the idea of like, why did a British orthopedic physician get so involved with manual therapy and massage approaches? Because that's very un-British orthopedics of the 1940s and 50s. It just seemed like it didn't fit at all. And I was talking in Canada to a group of, I was teaching a class in Canada years ago, and there was a guy in class who had been at the Syriax Institute in London. And he said, I'll tell you why. I was like, okay. He goes, most people don't know this. And this is the fact I want to maybe encourage you to see if we can track it down and validate. He said, most people don't know this, but again, in the early years before we had the expansive spread of education, a lot of what was taught in manual therapy was passed down through familial lineages of, my father did this and so I do it kind of thing. Or like my uncle did this and so therefore I do that. Leon Chateau talks about his uncle Boris Chateau and Stanley Leaf and some of these other people that were closely associated with the family tradition of doing this kind of stuff. Apparently, according to this guy that told me in his class, one of James Syriax's distant relatives is Per Henrik Ling.
Wow.
So that whole thing of the manual therapy stuff had gotten passed down through his family lineage to him. Again, as the story supposedly goes. So I never tracked down to validate if that was actually true, but that's curious to see how some of those things show up later on with those connections with other people.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we'll take this. SOMA is recruiting any genealogists that are listening out there.
Uh-huh.
See if you can
Cool.
help
Yeah.
us figure out a connection between Syriacs and
Yeah.
Henry Kling.
These days with all the technology on the gene trees and genealogy sites and all that kind of stuff should be easier to track that down.
See if we can find an answer for you, Whitney.
Yeah. Yeah.
I kind of want to throw you a curveball off of something that you said there. Uh,
Okay.
Potentially a curveball. With the idea of those who don't pay attention to history are doomed to repeat it. Can you think of any instances where you've seen that happen in the massage therapy industry?
Yeah. All the time. Um, Here's one that comes up a lot, and this is just you see people excited and exuberant in their youthful process of this, saying like, I don't think the existing associations are doing a good job. I'm going to start a new group, I'm going to start a new association kind of thing. And so, I mean, I've seen this happen numerous times with some people feeling like we're going to do something more different. We're going to make sure we do it right. Um, that has been tried and done so many times of trying to make those kind of things. And there's so much that goes into understanding what's involved in that whole entire process of getting people to do things. And so, yeah, we could use improvements in those things, but a lot of times we are better served by trying to work within and change the existing systems than just start from scratch and do something all over again and make those same mistakes that those organizations made 50 years ago, 40 years ago, or whatever it was.
Right. Yeah. That is definitely a hard lesson to learn.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good one, Whitney. I like
Yeah.
that.
And you want to support people's efforts and recognize and validate their ideas like, yeah, I want to do something and I've got some energy. So it's like, go for it, but go for it. But listen to the people who've done this before and talk to them and get some ideas from them first of what are some of your pitfalls and things that you're going to want to do and find what you're going to run into that's going to be a challenge, so you can see if this is really where your energies are best spent.
Right. Excellent. Um, I want to ask you about those because you talked about your first manuals and like taping them to the paper, photos to the paper and
Yeah.
making copies. Do you still have your original manuscripts of the orthopedic?
Yeah, I've got a few copies of that. I tell everybody every once in a while I go to a workshop and somebody brings one. Hey, look what I've got. It's like, all right, give that to me. I want it because I want to destroy it.
No.
But just no. Um, yeah, I still got some of that stuff, and there are still some floating around out there. It's always helpful to kind of go back and reflect and look at like, yeah, we really did come a long way from where we did this stuff early on. So yeah, I've still got some of that stuff.
Well, and also I would push back on you just a little bit and say, look for those gems where some things maybe haven't changed so much.
Yeah.
Be on the right track, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right about that. So, and part of it is too just my collection of resources and books and materials has long overflowed the number of bookshelves that I have. And so like there's certain points they got to say like, and I'm one of those people that's like, you know, I I recognize and it's like, oh, there's so much value potentially in here, but like, okay, this is a sports medicine textbook from 1982. So, yeah, it was great in 1987 when you bought it, but this is not always necessarily current stuff any longer. Do you really need to hold on to this kind of thing? But yeah,
I think you do.
yeah. I was gonna say just one other thing on that too. That I don't think I had alluded to this. That when I was talking about um, how much all of these other people that you've been talking to and look at the people who are really big movers and shakers in our field are all those self-directed, self-motivated learners. Um, at that time that I was, working with the clinic at Emory and doing the work with Benny and all that kind of thing. This was all pre-internet days, of course. And so the only way to get access to a lot of these kinds of resources was in university libraries. And I was super, super lucky in that I lived just a couple miles from Emory University, and it's a great medical school, and they had a phenomenal medical library there. And so, like, anytime I had spare time, um, instead of going out and drinking and partying like my friends were, I was in the medical library over at Emory, just exploring stuff, just like I'd walk in and like, where am I going today? What aisle am I going to go down to and what am I going to pull off the shelf? And it's like, oh, this is cool and this is cool. And, that's part of that whole process, like, going to look at the references in the back. And so like, where's this article? So I go get that article off the shelf. This is fascinating stuff. Photocopy this kind of stuff, take it home. And it's like, just try to accumulate the knowledge and resources in those kind of environments. And my encouragement to people now is just recognize how lucky we are that we live in a world in a time when you don't have to do that anymore. You don't have to wait to, find some university library. The world, especially the internet academic resources and things that are out there for us now are just so incredibly vast. And there's lots of tools out there that we can use to help consolidate these kinds of things to help us, learn stuff that can really be applicable to our day-to-day practice.
Yeah, absolutely. It's right there at our fingertips.
Yeah.
Um, but also support your libraries.
Yeah, because they're still doing super valuable. And to me, this is one of those things. I love the smell of a library.
Yeah,
There's, if it's one of those things that's just like, I'd love just to go in there and it's quiet and it smells like knowledge. It's just like, um, that's one of those sort of whole body sensory experiences that I won't ever kind of like let go of.
right. Yeah. And I'm going to make a statement here just because I can. I think, and I don't think I'm exaggerating or being hyperbolic, but I think librarians are some of the most important people on the planet. I think
Yeah.
they're crucially um, undervalued and under unsung heroes.
Oh,
Um,
yeah, absolutely.
they're always the most gracious, and I love libraries and librarians, and obviously I love collections.
Yeah.
And speaking of that, Whitney, do you have other things of massage therapy do you have a collection of massage history?
Well, only in that, just my own personal history of connections with things. And then, I have some of the other resources of things that, Pat Benjamin's book and a few other things that are, and there's some other texts and things I have that I know are no longer printed that I will probably want to hold on to just because I think they're historically valuable things that are part of our evolution along those lines. So yeah, I do still keep some of that stuff, and I'm kind of a book hoarder about that kind of thing because it's just again it's that like you never know when you're going to need to go back and look at that kind of thing. Like it might have been 10 years since I opened it, but it's all I know where it is. It's there, if I need it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
What do you think that today's practitioners could benefit or learn from an understanding of massage's history?
Well, I think uh, looking at what people have done in the past and especially looking at some of the obstacles that they've overcome to do this. Um, in particular, I was reflecting on that, having just listened to the episode that you did with Benny. Like, I mean, he's somebody who just overcame so many challenges and obstacles and took massage so far because of the passion about helping people. It's just like that whole thing, and just to put another little anecdote about him and things that I learned from because I learned so many just little things, the little things about how to do things in the classroom. I don't know if you noticed this on your interview with him, but one of the things he always taught me as a teaching educator, repeat the question that somebody asks you. And I don't know if you noticed this, but when you asked him a question, he repeated the question back to you and then answered it. That's that natural teacher thing. But that also, the whole learning to connect with people. There was one time, another quick little story. Benny and I were teaching together at a course in North Carolina, and it was some weekend where there was some gigantic furniture show in town, and we hadn't planned ahead far enough to get a rental car reservation or something like that. And we were just like, oh, don't worry about it. We'll just get a rental car when we get to the airport because, there's always rental cars. We got to the airport and like we didn't know that this was a huge furniture show. Nobody had any rental cars. And so we were standing around. Benny goes, all right, hang on. I'll get us a car. And I was like, I got to watch this because something's going to happen here. And he goes up to the counter. First thing he does, and this is something he always taught me. First thing you do, look at that name tag. Kirby, how you doing today? Oh man, I bet you are so stressed because of I get that this is a big problem here. We just need a car. And listen, I'll do whatever it takes, you help me out here. But he made a personal connection with that person in a way that we had a car in 30 minutes. I mean, I don't know how he does it, but he does it. But that is an example of how somebody's being completely influences the way they interact with their clients and do things because that whole thing about the personal connection process and there's a great lesson from somebody like him of that's how you make that connection with people and that's why you have great treatment results is because of the client therapist relationship. It's forefront and it's number one and that's what makes that so magical and so powerful.
Yeah. I think for me, what that's bringing up, that story and how to relate it to massage is we've really got to learn to slow down and remember that we're dealing with, like you talked about earlier with the birds, we're dealing with individuals here,
Yeah.
lives and histories, and slowing down and making that personal connection is so important.
Yes, absolutely. And that is, that will help you so much in your own personal growth as well as what you're doing with your clients, I think. So just as any lesson, look at some of the things that have been challenges and how these people have been able to stick around for 30, 40, 50 years or so in this profession, doing those kinds of things, and how it continues to reward them in so many different ways. So that's one of the really important things that I think comes out of looking into the history that way.
Yes. Are there any particular stories or anything that you can share with us about how an understanding of or an appreciation for history has benefited you in your practice, Whitney?
Well, I think I've been, fascinated with looking at the lineage process of where many of these sort of treatment ideas and treatment concepts have come from. So that's been particularly helpful for me and fascinating to sort of look into and explore those kind of things. And then seeing the relationships like, oh, if that person studied with so and so over there, now I see why they are influenced in that way. And this is an important part of that whole particular system. This way, I need to go look at that kind of stuff so I can better understand those things. So it's kind of like that whole idea of systems theory, of looking at the ways in which all these different things are interconnected with each other. And the things that I was speaking to you about earlier too, about geography. It's really interesting, like looking at how Southeastern massage evolved different than Pacific Northwestern massage, which was different than, mid Pacific Coast Bay Area massage, which is different than, what happened in New England and some of these other places because of the influences from these different people and understanding how some of these different systems and methods go together. That's particularly rich and valuable in developing a comprehensive perspective about not only what we do, but what a lot of other folks do as well.
Mm. Oh, I like that. I could nibble on that for a while, Whitney.
Yeah,
We think about, we like to divide things between Eastern influences and Western influences when we talk
yeah.
about massage history, but then to break it down into like American regional, I could sit with that for probably the rest of my life, actually.
Yeah, I mean, there's some interesting thing. I mean, look at like your discussions earlier with Sandy talking about her being kind of centered in and staying in the Midwest area in Michigan. Most of her career focus has been in that time, and David was all over the map a little bit, with Chicago, and then his move to Texas and all this kind of stuff. And you see some of those shifts and changes and how they carry things with them to these different places. Like I carried Benny with me from Georgia to Oregon, and then influenced other people in different places as well. So those, it's almost like you watch the seeds get dropped, and you see how they cross pollinate other plants and other subspecies in other different areas as well. And that part of it is really fascinating.
Oh my gosh. Oh, that's brilliant, Whitney. Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you for
yeah,
sharing.
yeah.
Um, okay, let's move into some closing thoughts as we get closer to the end of our time together. What legacy do you hope that you are leaving, or what do you hope you'll be remembered for in your work with massage therapy, Whitney?
Well, I have a feeling that, most people will probably associate me with the idea of, sort of popularizing more attention, at least on assessment because of the books, that I've written focused on that. But I really would hope also that people would recognize and focus attention on my passion is about education, about quality education, quality teaching, and quality learning processes, because I do think that's a huge piece that really makes a mark on how we train the practitioners of the future. And we have too often in education just done what was done to us, which, again, that's how that whole legacy process of the classroom, with the sage on the stage model has proliferated for so long. But there's so many other innovative ways to get people to learn things. And that's something I'm still exploring to this day and constantly fascinated with. And so I hope maybe that gets left as somebody else picks up that mantle of wanting to be really interested in education to that degree as well.
And that you bring up um, innovative ways to think and come up with new ideas. That interprofessional relationships with other practitioners in other fields of study, that I think that that definitely is a good place to start with that. And I'm
Yeah. And just as an idea, I would really encourage maybe people in their community to do this. I started a group back last year because I had been in a group years ago in another town that I was living in that was an interprofessional group of people that did, various types of either manual therapy or body-oriented practices or whatever. And we started a group here in Central Oregon that was trying to pull together massage therapists, PTs, OTs, physical trainers, Pilates instructors, yoga teachers, all people doing things with the body and try to encourage a greater degree of interprofessional communication. And man, if we could do that in multiple communities in lots of different places, it would really help everybody because we learn so much from what other people are doing in these places. Like, oh man, that's eye-opening. I never thought of approaching something that way. Or like I got a client that's just like, what I do is not right for them, but they really could benefit from yada yada yada, whatever it is. That's just something that I think would be really valuable to help that whole cross-pollination and interprofessional development.
Yeah. Oh, I love that idea too.
Mhm.
Um, all right. So if you could preserve or record the story of any massage practitioner that is currently deceased, who would you choose?
Oh, wow. I know he recorded some of this in his early books, but I would love to have a long sit down conversation with Leon Chateau about his family and personal lineage of the European manual therapy world that influenced so many people and influenced that whole approach to neuromuscular therapy that he taught and the whole osteopathic approaches and things like that. Because I do think there's a lot of rich integration there that would be super fascinating to kind of track that back and see where some of those things came from and how they've influenced modern day practitioners.
Excellent.
Yeah.
All right. Along those same lines, who is someone that you would love to see on a future episode of the Hands of History podcast?
So I thought about this a little bit, and a name that comes to mind, and again, this is kind of like this will be along your theme of tracking geography relationships. I would love to see you have a conversation with Grace Chan in Toronto. Because you will get a lot more of the Canadian perspective of what massage and manual therapy has done there. And she's been around for a very long time and watched all the same kind of thing grow and evolve, and interacted a good bit with the AMTA in the early years here as well. Um, she would be a fascinating person, I think, to bring in to kind of get another different perspective about that as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Kind of speaking about that and international relationships, I wasn't aware until recently. AMTA once did an international convention type thing in Toronto, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, it was. I shouldn't laugh about this, but it was right after 9/11.
Oh,
Um, and the thing I was laughing about was um, that David Kent was scheduled to present at that thing, and at this time, David Kent was doing a lot of workshops on cadaver dissections for
mhm.
people, and so we were David's good friend of mine, and we were both speaking at that conference, and he told me this story about like now you can imagine shortly after 9/11 going through customs between the US and Canada with a large suitcase, full of equipment and stuff like that. Well, David's large equipment suitcase wasn't equipment, it was body parts. And
Oh,
so he got into the uh, customs people and they said, like, we're going to need to open this up to take a look at it. He's like, I don't think you want to open this up to take a look at it. He goes, oh, yes, we do. It's like, okay, go ahead. And so They did, and I think they perhaps maybe regretted that a little bit. But yeah, they did do this sort of international cross the border conference there in Toronto.
Yeah.
Um,
You presented at that.
yes,
All
I'm
right.
pretty sure that was the one. Yeah, I was like pretty sure. Yeah.
How was that? Anything stick out in memory from that?
Um, David's story stuck out for that for me. But that's pretty much all. I can remember the little bed and breakfast that I was at there. I'm trying to wonder, like, maybe was this Toronto or maybe it was Montreal or something like that. I don't know. They all kind of run together after a while. So, and that's been, over 20 years ago now. So that kind of runs together.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Let me ask you then, Whitney, is there anything that we haven't covered that you would like to explore in our last few moments together?
Boy, I think we've covered a lot of ground. I don't know there's anything that I have that I don't think we have sort of touched on in terms of influential things. I would just say, reiterating something that I spoke to you about before we came on air here, which is that I want to say a big thank you and kudos to you for putting this series together. I think, the first three episodes I have listened to were just super valuable and super informative and really reflect, again, some of the critical importance of so much of this stuff of recognizing and listening to and pulling together a lot of these really important stories before these people are gone, because many of us are getting on up there. But it's so much different than listening to or just reading information about things in a textbook. The individual stories that you get to connect with people and recognize who these people are, and know that you can still today, you know, go message them on social media or ask them a question about something. That's really valuable, super, super valuable. So take advantage of that. And again, I just think this is a wonderful collection of things you're putting together here. And I thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of it.
Well, of course, Whitney. And yeah, I know exactly what you mean. For me, what I've really loved in doing these podcasts so far is how much I can see like not an exact reflection, but there's a reflection in our stories. And
Hmm.
there are things that you would think until you hear someone else say the same thing, you're like, I didn't know anybody else experienced or felt that same way as they were going through things
Yeah, yeah,
in therapy. So yeah, I think in terms of connection is really what this podcast, in an unexpected way, has for me myself.
yeah. That's great. Well, certainly keep it up, and I'm eagerly looking forward to hearing more stories coming down the pike too from other folks that are coming up as well.
Yes, definitely. And we're not opposed to international guests too. So I'm glad that you brought up a Canadian for us to check out.
Yeah, yeah.
Tell us what you have coming up next, around the bend for the rest of the year, if you have anything planned out, and how people that are interested can learn more about you, Whitney, and get in contact with you if they want to know more.
Yeah, so people can always connect with me through our company, the Academy of Clinical Massage, and that's just at academyofclinicalmassage.com. And doing a few in-person courses and stuff this year, and then also our constantly evolving online programs. We have some really exciting new things that are coming down the pike with our online programs a little bit later this year. We're releasing several new programs on assessment and some things on pain science and biomechanics, but we're also integrating some very new technologies into these programs that I am super excited about, things that I've been trying to bring to fruition for a couple of decades that are now becoming feasible for us to accomplish, to really personalize people's learning experiences and make things really engaging and relevant for them. So that's kind of where my attention and focus is right now.
Excellent. Well, Whitney, I want to thank you for joining us here at the Hands of History podcast. It's been quite an honor to talk to you, and I've learned so much.
Great. Well, thank you again, and Kirby, so much for the invitation. I've been thoroughly enjoyed having the conversation as well.
If you enjoyed this podcast, please consider donating to the Society of Massage Archives so we can continue to bring you this episode and other resources to fulfill our mission of preserving and integrating the historical knowledge of massage therapy's professional advocacy and traditional techniques to guide and enrich our contemporary practices. Thank you. You have been listening to the Hands of History podcast, a production of the Society of Massage Archives. You can learn more about the Society at societyofmassagearchives.org. We are also on Facebook and Instagram. Do you know someone whose hands have helped shape the practice of massage? If you or someone you know would make a great guest for future episodes of this podcast, please email the Society at societyofmassagearchives@gmail.com. Society of Massage Archives, all one word, @gmail.com.